What's the billion-dollar workplace issue no one's talking about? I'm Annie Gibbins. Women's Biz Leaders starts now. Welcome to Women's Biz Leaders, presented by Women's Biz Global, where each episode we dive into the journeys and successes of remarkable women in business. In this episode, we are joined by Hasia Atherton, founder of Empowered Women in Trades. Welcome to the program, Hasia.
Thank you for having me, Annie.
Such a joy to have you here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. What is this billion-dollar issue, this workplace issue that no one is talking about, but we need to?
We do need to be talking about this. So poor organisational culture driving low levels of psychological well-being is costing companies billions of dollars a year. But the issue that no one's actually talking about is the masculine journey in creating psychological safety and creating psychological well-being. We've developed incredible programs that empower the minority groups, but we're really overlooking the masculine journey towards achieving high quality organisational cultures.
So what sort of factors are contributing to this situation, and what does that look like in a corporate environment?
So sadly, the patriarchy system has definitely affected women, but often what gets overlooked is how it's actually affected men. So from a young age, we steal the tears from little boys, telling them not to cry, to man up, to be tough, and creating them as men that disconnect from their human condition. But then we turn around and we ask these men to be able to lead organisational cultures that have high levels of inclusivity and belonging and emotion, and it's very confusing for a lot of these men on how they actually create that when they've been told their whole lives that they need to be strong and stoic and silent.
And that's true. We are all talking about women, and diversity and inclusion. And I must admit, we rarely talk about men and the challenges that they have in this space. And they are real challenges, aren't they? So these challenges, how are they significant? How do they start pushing through those and championing change for themselves as men?
Well, I've had the privilege to interview many men in this space and many male leaders in male-dominated industries such as construction and manufacturing. And what really upsets me is there's a lot of fear among the men. They want to do the right thing to empower the women in their team. But for example, they're very scared if they've got an extra ticket for the footy. Do they invite the female on their team, or will that be perceived the wrong way? And there's no kind of psychological safety for men to really show up and say, I don't actually know what the right thing to do here is. When I'm having a one-on-one, do I close the door or do I leave the door open? Do I ask the secretary to come in and sit on the meeting? So by default, men are starting to pull away in actually really investing in a lot of women in their teams because they're so scared of doing the wrong thing. By default, they start to shut down and isolate sometimes the women on their team, not through any malice, but through this deep fear of doing the wrong thing and thus not doing anything.
Which is really tragic, isn't it? Like, if in doubt, do nothing. And I totally understand that. Are men having these conversations with each other, or do you think this is really a hidden issue that we're talking about now?
It's quite deeply hidden issue, and through a lot of my interviews with men, we haven't gotten to that deep core issue of that fear until well into our interview or well into a couple of our sessions. The other thing that often happens with men in male-dominated industries is they actually anchor their masculine identity to their job, whether that's being an investment banker or a tradesperson. So with the changing landscape of more dynamic businesses with more diversity and inclusion, a lot of men are starting to really question what it means to be a man. And there was a beautiful interview that I did with one of the men that I'm coaching at the moment, and he came to me and he said, "You're so right, I had a bad day at work and I came home feeling less of a man, so I started to do unhealthy things to try and make myself feel like a man again," whether that was getting on Tinder to try and find a date that night or expressing microaggressions towards other people. And he picked himself up on that and started to go, okay, I can link that I had a bad day at work and now my behaviour is actually not that great. What do I do about that? But unless we create psychological safety for men to actually explore the ability to self-reflect and identify those poor behaviours and really support them to find positive anchors for their masculinity, like being a protector, like being a provider, and actually coming to a workplace and protecting and providing for their team through an emotional lens, we're not going to be able to create high quality organisational cultures where there's high quality connections, because men are sitting there in that silent cage of fear, of not expressing vulnerability, of not being able to show up and say, I'm an inadequate leader at this moment because I don't know how it is to lead a certain gender or a certain culture, and I need to have the space to ask those curious questions to be able to learn how to become the best leader for that person. But we can't do that if we don't create spaces for men to be vulnerable and ask those silly questions.
Which is why it's so great to be having this conversation. So what strategies do you feel that we can have for men and women to be collaborating more in the workplace? It's nice to say we're all about diversity and inclusion, but what specific strategies will help us progress together?
So as human beings, all human beings, we've got three basic psychological needs: a need for autonomy, a need for competence, and a need for belonging. And if we look at that need for belonging, it's first of all reflecting on ourselves and what belonging looks like for us, and how do we get a sense of belonging, and then analysing, is that actually a healthy foundation or an unhealthy foundation that we're connecting that sense of belonging to. And then once we understand that, we can then start to talk to other people and co-create those sense of belonging. So if I was your leader, I can say, Annie, describe to me what a sense of belonging feels like for you. And then as your leader, I can start to craft organisational cultures that really support that sense of belonging for you, because it is unique to you. And that will also empower your autonomy, because you feel like you're starting to control your environment. And it will help me build my competence as a leader, because now I can see that I'm actually creating an inclusive, supportive environment for yourself. But that's a really uncomfortable conversation to sometimes come to your team and say, I don't know the right thing to do by you. I don't know the right thing to really create a deep sense of inclusivity and belonging. So you need to teach me so that I can be the best leader for you. And that's a conversation a lot of men feel really uncomfortable saying, because it shows vulnerability. And as a society, we've taught men that vulnerability equals weakness.
Yes.
But I think it equals strength. Having someone, a leader, come to you and saying, you teach me how I can make you feel a deep sense of belonging in this organisation, and then I'll go fight to make that happen for you, is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
It sure is, and it's such a huge leap for businesses and large companies to be able to transition towards providing that safe place that people really believe. Because I agree with you, once you're in that space, I mean, you have the power to do anything, because you're not thinking in a self-protective way. So what do you see as the advantages, the impact that this will have on organisations if we can actually work together to, appreciate and make people feel safe in their vulnerabilities to be able to pursue their careers, in a more collaborative way?
Yeah, so once we actually have the courage to co-design those really empowering cultures, we're all of a sudden going to create psychological safety for people to challenge ideas, to potentially put innovative ideas on the table without fear of being reprimanded or shut down or being embarrassed. We're going to create psychological safety for people to come to work and say, I'm actually really struggling at home and that is affecting my work. Can someone help me or take that meeting because I've just had a very challenging personal news and I'm not in the right emotional state to lead this client meeting. So if we create safe space, then all of a sudden we're going to do that client meeting so much more, because someone can step in or support or watch if that person's struggling in the meeting and step in and really support that person. But if we're not creating cultures where someone can come and express that they're really struggling, and then as a team we know how to support that person. For example, if I'm really struggling, I don't like anyone asking me if I'm okay or do you need help or anything like that. That's very personal to me. So if I come to work and say no questions about how I'm going or how my weekend was, my team knows she's not in a great place. So let's make sure that we step up and support her. Other people want to talk about it and get it off their chest and experience their emotions in a safe space to be able to put them down and then go into the meeting. So it's again coming back to creating those cultures and leadership structures where you create that safe space for people to be vulnerable and tell you what they need in that moment, and then you as a leader lead upon that request.
Amazing. We started this show by calling it a $1 billion workplace issue. It really is. Is your research telling you that when we get this right, if we actually start creating environments that everyone does feel safe, you're saying it'll affect the economy by billions of dollars?
Yes, so in Australia it's over $50 billion a year we lose from absentees, disengaged employees and people with poor psychological well-being. In the US it's over $450 billion, all of the research is showing. So if we actually create organisational cultures where people feel that that's their safe harbour to come and show up as their authentic self, to be able to put their best efforts into work, to actually grow and flourish as human beings, and that's all kinds of human beings, that we can come together with a deep appreciation and gratitude for what we bring to the table, then all of a sudden we're going to find so much more profit inside our organisations without going and getting another client, by just improving that psychological well-being. If we manage our people and we create high levels of psychological well-being for our people, then our revenue and our bottom line will just manage itself.
So what's one thing that you could ask one of our viewers today who's watching this thinking, you know what, she's right, Hacia has got this nailed. It is a big issue. It's a huge issue, particularly for men, but it's also about the whole of business to be able to bring out the best of all of our employees. What's one thing that they could do if they were going back into their workplace today?
So my call to action is very much, first of all, do that self-reflection and understand what a sense of belonging is for yourself, and then have the courage to go into and speak to your leaders and explain that this is what I need to really show up as my best self, and if we can provide this environment for myself, then I'm going to be able to give so much more to this organisation, and my productivity is going to increase, my well-being is going to increase, and that is only going to be financially beneficial to your organisation. So don't be afraid to go in and say, hey, there's actual financial benefit for you in creating an organisation where I know I can show up, have a deep sense of belonging and thrive as a human being, and don't be scared to ask for what you need.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Absolutely brilliant topic. I hope you've all been enjoying that conversation. Exactly that. Take that tip from Hacia. Go back to your workplaces and say, hey, do you want to definitely increase the bottom line? We can all do this together, and start teaming up, working this together, and definitely getting to a place where we feel more safe and secure in our workplaces. Till next time, thanks for joining us.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.